Hi, my name is Machine, and this is Understanding Fortnite. So today I want to address a really common problem that I see, and that's people that can perform really well in creative, but they can't seem to transfer that skill over into real games. So I've kind of mentioned this in other videos before, but right now I just want to kind of go like deep into the science of just how your brain works here. And if you're questioning the validity of this is pretty much just a rehash of a university lecture that someone's been nice enough to share with me. This diagram here is just a very simplified way to visualize your brain. So you have your working memory or your conscious memory. And this is basically what you're thinking of right now. You have your explicit memory. This is the long-term memory that stores events or kind of miscellaneous information. And then you have your implicit memory. These are like your automatic thoughts or processes, things that you don't really have to think about, things like walking. Or sometimes people refer to muscle memory. That's kind of what this is. When people talk about muscle memory, it's usually in reference to just very simple stuff, but I think it's very rare that you have a skill that's just raw muscle memory. Then you have your input, which would be your senses, such as seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, anything like that. And then your output would be your actual actions that you're commanding your body to do. So your input and output actually interact differently with these two parts of your memory. Your working memory can both get inputs and command outputs. Your implicit memory can also command outputs and can also receive inputs. Now where things change is the explicit memory has a really hard time dealing directly to inputs or outputs. The explicit memory is commanded by our working memory, but the way the working memory works is it needs to rehearse something over and over again. If it stops rehearsing whatever you're thinking about for too long, then you simply just forget it. If you rehearse something enough times in the working memory, it has the chance to go into your explicit memory. Now you can see for Fortnite this might be a big problem because we have to think about many different things at once, and we need to perform mechanics on top of that. So we could not rely on the working memory to do all that, because that would require us to rehearse a bunch of different things at once, and that's pretty much almost impossible. And we cannot have all of our memories in the explicit long-term memory, because then it's still relying on the working memory to use those memories. So that's why the implicit memory is super useful. The implicit memory is totally separate from these two memories. It can use its output and input all on its own, and you don't even need to think about it. The only downside to this is it takes a very long time to get a memory to become totally implicit or totally automatic. And often what our brains do, if it's not necessary for a skill to become totally implicit, it'll do part of it with the implicit memory and it'll do the other part with the working memory. But ideally, we want to have as much stuff done by the implicit memory as possible. And that really comes down to the way that you practice things. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little exercise here. So let's consider this red paint as your mechanics. So I'm just going to draw your average player here that might be having this issue of performing well in creative, but just losing all of that skill or not being able to transfer that skill to BR. This is just an estimation. Some people have this divided differently, but I'm just going to assume that we have about this much of the working memory dedicated to mechanics. And then this blue here is going to represent your game sense, like decision-making things. The implicit memory never really gets full. The only limitation to the implicit memory is how long you would have to spend to actually make that skill totally implicit. Okay, so this is what you look like in creative. Lots of space for both of these things. So let's just assume that your working memory is actually full here. And the way that I think this usually plays out is you start doing all the mechanics that you normally do, and basically you use what's left in your working memory to perform the rest of your decision making. Okay, so now let's say we take the same player and we put him in game. Basically what happens here is you have this whole new set of decision making that needs to happen, which is all your BR related stuff like rotations, looting, all of these things. So that's going to come in here, and that's going to eat away at either one of these. Depending on the player, the mechanics get totally eaten up, or they just resort to a totally different set of mechanics that they feel comfortable doing with their implicit memory. Some people have the opposite effect, where they just don't make smart decisions in BR anymore. The BR skills or your just like having that awareness just totally eats up all of their decision making, and it's just not good anymore. So to solve this problem, we're going to have to start moving more of this stuff into the implicit memory. So this is what a pro player's working memory might look like. You have very little mechanics in the working memory. Their mechanics are usually all in their implicit memory. If you look at somebody like Bizzle, he has very simple and smooth mechanics, and basically I think what he's done is he's basically tried to learn the bare minimum so that it's way faster to make that memory implicit. So not only that, a lot of pro players that have played a lot of scrims, they're actually going to have a little bit of their BR skills into their implicit memory. I think the main thing to remember is things tend to go into the implicit memory when they can be rehearsed over and over again. And it's really hard to do that in BR because every game is very different. So the BR skills that are going to become implicit memory are the ones that are usually the most common. And it takes a super long time to build that here. And you can see that I've left this empty space here, and that's for a very specific reason. This space here is going to be for your self-correction. Some of you may have experienced this before, and once you build enough of these skills over to your implicit memory, rather than just sitting there and focusing really hard on what you're doing, you actually get to the point where you can actually sit back a little bit and watch yourself play, and you can actually correct yourself as you play. Whereas if you're doing something so focus intensive that it took like every ounce of your brain power to actually perform that, you can't really self-correct. That's why isolating mechanics works so well. If you're just practicing solo mechanics, it may just look like this, and that's perfect because then you can have this nice room here for self-correction. You don't have to worry about decision making or anything. You can actually have this, save this room in your working memory to self-correct. And just to clarify, self-correction is the main thing that allows you to build implicit memory faster. So just to summarize, the solution to fixing this issue, your skills not transferring over into BR, is to take these mechanics, take them out of here, and through isolated practice, try and build most of your mechanics in here. This almost seems counterintuitive because a lot of people that I see have this problem tell me that they don't have a mechanical problem. And what that tells me is they looked at their mechanics and thought they were okay and they stopped practicing them. And as soon as you stop practicing your mechanics, that's when you live with this problem. Your mechanics don't go into your implicit memory anymore because you're just sitting in this zone where your working memory is full all the time. You need to keep practicing your mechanics or else this is never going to happen. Even if you already think they're good, you should never stop practicing them. That's a huge mistake. Now, the next thing you can do is you can actually start doing the exact same thing to your decision making. This is a totally different process though. To put decision making in your implicit memory, it has to be things that are rehearsed. And that's what I like to call your fundamentals. This bit being erased here, this can basically be all of your peaks. The other things that I like to show on my maps, like spray return, swap delay, all of those things can be rehearsed and they can be erased very easily and moved over into your implicit memory. Those kind of fundamental things are almost treated the same way in mechanics because you're actually practicing something over and over again. And that's why I like to push my peak maps so much. It seems that everything except video games currently, all sports, music, musical instruments, every single teacher always starts with a set of fundamentals. And I think in every single one of those skills in sports, what those fundamentals are doing is exactly this. They're erasing this little bit. It's erasing this little bit of area in your working memory and moving it over here for that sole purpose of being able to self-correct. Because once you can start self-correcting yourself under full load, that's when you really start to blow up. That's when average players turn into really good players. Once they have this room to start self-correcting, then they can really start improving at a super rapid rate. Especially when you have enough room to correct yourself while playing BR. So in the next video, I'm going to go more in depth of what fundamentals you can be practicing or how you can practice those fundamentals efficiently. And yeah, that's all for this video. Thanks guys.